They moved my desk next to a janitor's closet after 14 years of loyalty, replacing me with a suit who couldn't read a spreadsheet. They thought I was obsolete, but I knew the one thing that would destroy them: their own ego. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I knew exactly where I stood with Fortman Cross Analytics the moment I saw my new view. It wasn't a corner office. It wasn't even a window seat. It was a gray metal desk shoved into a dim alcove on the 8th floor, directly adjacent to the janitor's closet. The air didn't smell like success or coffee. It smelled aggressively of pine saw cleaning fluid and hot printer ink. 14 years. I had given this company 14 years of my life. I had missed anniversaries, skipped my kids' soccer games, and pulled all-nighters to save client accounts that were bleeding money. And this was my reward: a chair that squeaked with a piercing high-pitched whine every time I shifted my weight, and a bank of fluorescent lights above me that flickered with a headache-inducing strobe effect. My name is Matt Langston. I'm 49, divorced, and currently putting 2 kids through expensive state colleges. In the corporate ecosystem, I am the mechanic. I am the guy they call when the data models break, when the customer files get corrupted, or when the forecasting tools implode 2 hours before a board meeting. I am the one who crawls under the hood, gets covered in grease, and patches it all back together so some idiot in a tailored Italian suit can take credit for the smooth ride. I sat there listening to the hum of the floor buffer in the distance, staring at my screens. I felt a physical heaviness in my chest, a mix of exhaustion and acute humiliation. It wasn't just that they had moved me, it was the silence that accompanied it. No one said a word, no explanation, just a new seating chart and a cardboard box. It was a clear message: you are furniture. But the silence was broken by the arrival of a company-wide email that hit my inbox with a cheerful ping. Subject: Strategic Talent Acquisition. Please welcome Bryce Keenan. I clicked it and my stomach turned over. There was his photo beaming at the top of the message. Perfect hair, skin that looked like it had been exfoliated with diamond dust, and a smile that said he'd never had to worry about a mortgage payment in his life. The text was full of corporate fluff about synergy and vision, but the subtext was screaming at me. The betrayal felt sharper than a knife in the back. It was a total erasure of my existence. I spent the rest of that morning trying to work, but my focus was shattered. Every time someone walked past my new exile zone near the closet, they averted their eyes. It was as if catching my gaze would infect them with my bad luck. The Stevenson project, a $22 million beast of a contract, was supposed to be my ticket up. It was a massive overhaul for a 300-store retail chain. Inventory logic, customer segmentation, predictive modeling. It was the kind of complex, heavy-lifting job that defined a career. Weeks ago, our CEO, Alan Pierce, had looked me in the eye during the kickoff and said, "Matt, you are critical to this engagement. No one knows the bones of this company like you do." I had let myself believe him. I had let myself hope that maybe, finally, I was going to be a VP. Instead, I was reading about Bryce Keenan, a transformation expert poached from our competitor who was now leading the initiative. We had the all-hands meeting that afternoon. Alan stood at the front of the room, hands folded in that fake pious way he used when he was selling a lie. "Bryce brings the big-picture vision we need for the Stevenson engagement," Alan said, gesturing to the golden boy standing next to him. "He will be driving the strategy moving forward." Then came the sentence that nearly made me walk out of the room. "And Matt," Alan said, not even looking at me, "will handle all technical implementation." Handle, not lead, not partner, handle, like I was a janitor being told to mop up a spill. I sat there nodding like a good soldier, my face a mask of neutral compliance, but beneath the surface my pulse was hammering. They saw me as a tool, a wrench to be used and thrown back in the toolbox. They thought they could simply swap out the driver and the car would keep running. But as I looked at Bryce, preening in his $1,000 suit, a dark, cold thought settled in my mind. They assumed the systems ran on magic. They assumed the data cleaned itself. They had forgotten one crucial thing: I built the engine, and I was the only one who knew where the kill switch was. To understand why this hurts so much, you have to understand what I've done for Fortman CR. I didn't just push buttons, I saved them. 2 years ago, when the intern team wiped the code base for the energetic account, I rebuilt a 7-figure project from scratch over a holiday weekend. I didn't get a bonus. I got a "glad you fixed that," while the account managers rushed off to catch flights to a client summit in Aspen. I was the fixer, and now I was the help. I was finishing up some model outputs late that afternoon, the flickering light above me buzzing like an angry hornet, when a shadow fell across my desk. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The smell of expensive, musky cologne arrived before he did. "You must be the numbers guy," a voice said, smooth, overconfident. I turned my chair. Bryce Keenan was leaning halfway into my cubicle, resting his elbow on the partition wall like we were old college buddies. Up close, he looked even more like a stock photo model. "Matt Wright," he continued, not waiting for an answer. "Alan tells me you're a wizard with the back-end stuff, excited to jam with you on this." Jam with me? We were analyzing retail supply chains, not starting a garage band. "I'm Matt," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I manage the data architecture." Right, Bryce waved a hand dismissively. "I'm going to need you to pull some deep dive analytics for the client. I want to see retention breakdowns, but let's reimagine the framework, think future-proofing. I want the data to sing a story of synergy." I stared at him. "Synergy isn't a metric, Bryce. Do you want churn rates or lifetime value calculations?" He laughed, a hollow, practice sound. "Don't get bogged down in the weeds, Matt. Just get me the raw dumps. I'll handle the narrative. We're going to blow Stevenson away." He tapped the top of my monitor, my personal property, with his manicured finger. "I'll need those by end of day tomorrow. Thanks, buddy." He walked away without looking back, whistling a tune. He didn't ask about the legacy code. He didn't ask about the data integrity issues I had spent weeks correcting. He just wanted raw dumps so he could spin a fairy tale. He was a parasite in a suit, ready to feed off my work to fuel his ascent. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that he had just given me the exact opening I needed. By the time Thursday afternoon rolled around, the indignation had cooled into something far more dangerous: clarity. If Bryce wanted to treat me like a back-end workhorse, fine. But I wasn't going to let him steal another inch of my dignity. I didn't bother grabbing dinner. I walked straight back to my desk, the squeak of my chair echoing in the emptying office. I dropped my bag and woke up the monitors. The office was dead quiet, save for the hum of the HVAC system and the rhythmic cleaning sounds coming from the janitor's closet next door. It was the perfect environment for a trap. I opened a brand new folder on the shared drive. I titled it Stevenson Final Reports Q3. It looked crisp, professional, and entirely innocent. Inside, I began to build 6 specific files. To the untrained eye, or the eye of someone who cared only about shiny graphs and color palettes, these files were masterpieces. I used bold heat maps, sleek trend lines, and crisp arrows pointing toward growth. But underneath the gloss, they were poison. For File 1 Customer Trends, I built a gorgeous layout. I flipped the key metric so it showed a 20% drop in loyal customers. The reality, buried in the raw data only I knew how to access, was the opposite. Retention was at a record high. But Bryce wouldn't know that without checking the SQL database. For File 2, Revenue Forecast, I pulled numbers from our Australian division and intentionally converted the currency incorrectly. It inflated the revenue projection by $9 million. It looked believable enough to be exciting, but it was completely fictional. For File 3, Market Segment Priority, I dug up an ancient segmentation model from 2013, back when the client was targeting suburban baby boomers, and dressed it up as a brand new discovery. In reality, Stevenson's actual customer base had shifted entirely to the 25 to 34 demographic. I worked for hours crafting these beautiful lies. Then I built the real versions, accurate, tight, backed by 3 separate data pools, and locked them under my own user account with restricted permissions. Finally, I opened a private log. I documented every single step: timestamps, version histories, source formulas. If Bryce wanted a war, I was going to give him documentation so airtight it would choke him. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard the lazy rhythm of expensive loafers hitting the carpet. Bryce. He wasn't even subtle about it. He strolled into my cubicle area, not expecting me to be there, but didn't flinch when he saw me. "Burning the midnight oil, Matt? Good man," he said, leaning against a file cabinet. "Hey, shoot me your login. I need to grab some visuals for a client preview. My access is still lagging." I turned slowly in my chair. "Those folders aren't validated yet, Bryce. The data needs a scrub." He shrugged, offering that same infuriating, pitying smile. "No worries. I'll only pull what looks good. Don't overthink it." Don't overthink it, that was his entire philosophy. I didn't argue, I didn't fight. I just moved my mouse and opened the shared drive on my second screen, visible to him. "It's in the Q3 folder," I said quietly. He beamed. "Perfect, you're a lifesaver." I watched him walk back to his desk. From my position, I had a clear line of sight to his reflection in the glass partition. I minimized my work and pulled up the admin monitoring panel. I watched in real time as his user ID entered the folder. He hesitated for a beat, just one before he started downloading. He took all 6 files. He didn't select read-only. He didn't check the source data. He didn't even glance at the version notes I had left, which hinted that these were drafts. He just dragged them into his personal desktop folder like a kid grabbing Halloween candy. Then he did the dumbest thing he could have possibly done. He renamed them. I watched on the admin log as Stevenson Revenue ML draft became BK Strategic Rev Final. He stripped my initials. He replaced them with his own. He was claiming ownership of the errors before he even opened the files. I saved the log, screenshot the timestamp, and sat back. His fingerprints were now all over the weapon I had built to kill his career. The next morning, the trap began to close. At the Friday stand-up, Bryce was already at the front of the room, sleeves rolled up to show off his vintage watch. He had one of my poison charts projected on the big screen, the one showing the catastrophic dip in customer loyalty. "We've uncovered some surprising trends," Bryce said, his voice smooth as butter. "This chart here shows a significant dip in engagement, eye-opening stuff. It really challenges the legacy thinking." Kevin, a junior analyst who actually did his homework, narrowed his eyes at the screen. "Are we sure that's right? We just ran a retention promo last quarter. Redemption rates were through the roof. That chart contradicts the sales data." The room went quiet. This was the moment where a real leader would pause and verify. Bryce didn't blink. "Disruption doesn't always feel right, Kevin," Bryce said, offering a condescending smile. "Sometimes the truth challenges our assumptions. We need to trust the new framework." I sat in the corner, silent, nodding like a good soldier. Under the table, I was typing a note into my phone, logging the exact time Bryce defended the lie. For the next 3 weeks, Bryce rode the lie like it was a company car. He stripped my name off every model. He walked into meetings with printed decks, talking about customer churn velocity and pitching Stevenson's executives on a strategy targeting retirees, based entirely on my dummy file. He cut me out of every call. He told clients I was heads down on infrastructure so I wouldn't be in the room to correct him. He even used 3 of my dummy graphs in a public webinar. I watched it on mute, eating pretzels, writing down every false statistic he quoted. But the breaking point came late on a Friday. Lisa from sales swung by my desk looking nervous. "Hey," she whispered, holding a coffee cup with 2 hands. "Bryce already sent the Stevenson preview package." I stopped typing to who? Everyone, the exec team, the CFO, even Paul Stevenson. My jaw clenched. "He sent the draft." "He took off the draft tag," Lisa said. Janet Lynn replied. She said some of the projections seemed unusually optimistic. She wants to dig in during Monday's session. That wasn't a preview, that was a commitment. I waited until she walked away, then I opened my backup drive. I pulled every real file and compared them side by side with the poisoned ones Bryce had stolen. He hadn't changed a thing. The winter inventory planning file still had Iowa stores stocking swimwear in January. If Stevenson followed that forecast, they'd have crates of bikinis buried in snowdrifts. I documented it all again. Screenshots, logs, Slack history, even the MAC address of the laptop that downloaded the files. Then I called a buddy of mine, not company counsel, but a guy who knows how corporate knives get twisted. I sent him the full report with a short message. "If I get fired on Monday, here is the wrongful termination suit." Then I received the email from Alan Pierce. Subject: Stevenson meeting. "Matt, please bring the documentation back up for tomorrow's meeting, just in case." It was the ultimate insult. Alan knew Bryce was fluff, but he was betting on Bryce's charisma to sell the deal. I was being invited only as an insurance policy, a scapegoat to blame if the data looked messy. They wanted me there to clean up the spill. I loaded my flash drive with the real deck. The one with the truth. I printed hard copies. I packed everything into my bag. Bryce thought he had outpaced me. He thought he had erased me. But he had forgotten that while he was busy looking at the reflection in the mirror, I was the one holding the light. Tomorrow, he wasn't walking into a meeting. He was walking into a shredder. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, revealing a silence that felt heavy and expensive. The Stevenson boardroom was a glass-walled aquarium of corporate power, offering a panoramic view of the skyline that screamed authority. Inside, 15 people sat around a curved mahogany table. At the head sat Paul Stevenson himself, founder, mid-60s, with gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. Janet Lynn, his sharp-eyed CFO, was already flipping through the meeting agenda with a frown. Bryce breezed in behind me, grinning like he had just walked into his own surprise party. No nerves, no hesitation. He set up his laptop with the practiced ease of a performer. He cracked a joke about the view, someone chuckled politely. Then the lights dimmed and the show began. "Thanks, everyone," Bryce started, his voice projecting that perfect TED Talk cadence. "Really excited to share what we've uncovered. This isn't just an analytics refresh. It's a full transformation of how Stevenson Retail sees the future." He clicked to the first slide, the revenue chart. "This model shows a projected 40% spike in Q4, he said, gesturing to the climbing red line like it was gospel. I didn't flinch, I just looked at Janet, her brow twitched. "That's optimistic," she said, her pen hovering over her notepad. Bryce smiled, that condescending, knowing smile. "Just conservative projections based on the new segmentation strategy and adjusted churn assumptions." He clicked again, customer targeting. "We're shifting focus to the 55-plus consumer," Bryce announced, tapping the screen where a large pie chart dominated the view. "There is untapped value there." Paul Stevenson leaned forward, squinting. "80% of our sales come from customers under 35. We are a youth fashion brand." Bryce waved it off instantly. "That's what makes this such a bold shift. We're moving ahead of the trend. We're capturing the disposable income of the future." Then came the inventory plan, swimwear, December, Iowa. I watched a ripple of confusion go through the room. A few raised eyebrows, a low mutter from the VP of operations at the end of the table. Bryce kept talking, completely oblivious to the temperature in the room dropping. Janet closed her folder. The sound was a sharp thwack that silenced the room. She looked directly at him. "Mr. Keenan, how exactly did you develop these models?" Bryce blinked, he stumbled just slightly. Through a combination of cross-functional input and proprietary framework logic. It was a collaborative synthesis, really." Paul Stevenson didn't look at Bryce. He looked over at me, sitting silently near the back. "Mr. Langston," Paul said. I stood up. "Yes, sir." "You've been with Fortman Cross for a long time. Does this look right to you?" I didn't rush. I walked to the front of the room, holding my flash drive. "If I may." Paul nodded. "Please." I stepped up to the podium, unplugged Bryce's laptop, and slotted in my own. The screen flickered for a second, causing Bryce's fantasy world to dissolve into static. Then my deck appeared. "Slide 1, I said calmly. "Actual Q4 revenue projections, 6% growth, modest, real." Slide 2, loyalty engagement. "Retention is up, not down. The previous chart was inverted." Slide 3, age segmentation. 71% of your active buyers are between 25 and 34. Targeting boomers would be catastrophic. Then I dropped the hammer. I clicked to the next slide, which wasn't a graph. It was a log. "And finally," I said, my voice steady, "here are the access logs for the files you just saw. These show the original file names, marked draft only and invalid data being downloaded from my folder, renamed by user B. Keenan, and presented today without verification." I cycled through the evidence. Screen captures of Slack messages where he asked others to clean up the stolen files. Metadata showing the creation dates. Janet leaned in, her jaw tight. "These match the files we received last week." Paul kept his eyes on me, then shifted them slowly to Bryce. "And the swimwear in Iowa?" "Originally tagged seasonal hold draft only," I replied. Mr. Keenan pulled it before the final validation script ran. Bryce finally stood up, his face pale. "Look, there's obviously been a miscommunication regarding version control. I was operating off the..." Paul held up a single hand. "You're done." The silence that followed was absolute. Bryce stood there, mouth open, chest rising as if he were about to launch another buzzword defense. But he saw the look. In Paul's eyes, he saw the way Alan Pierce was staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact. He didn't say another word. Paul turned back to me. "Mr. Langston, do you have a version of this presentation we can actually use?" "Yes, sir," I said. "This is the final strategy." Bryce was gone by noon. There was no exit interview, no farewell email. A security guard stood by his cubicle while he packed his overpriced leather folio and his framed accolades. He didn't look at me when he walked past. He kept his head down, staring at the floor tiles he used to think he was too good to walk on. His badge didn't scan at the elevator, they had already deactivated it. By the close of business, his name was wiped from every shared drive and document trail. It was as if he had never existed, just a glitch in the system that had been patched out. That afternoon, Alan called an emergency all-hands meeting. He stood in the center of the bullpen, looking significantly less arrogant than he had a month ago. Effective immediately, Alan announced, Matt Langston is now head of data strategy. He will be leading the Stevenson account going forward. I didn't say anything, I just nodded and walked back to my new desk, but as I passed through the room, people looked up. This time they didn't avert their eyes, they looked me in the face. Some clapped. A few just nodded with that look of shared relief that says, finally, no balloons, no cake, but I'll take respect over cupcakes any day. I spent the rest of the week doing what should have been done years ago. I built a real team. I fired the sycophants and promoted the sharp analysts who had been buried under Bryce's regime. We didn't need transformation experts. We needed people who knew how to build models that actually worked. Janet Lynn mailed me a handwritten note 2 weeks later thanking me for keeping the project honest. It hangs framed above my desk now, right next to my first Stevenson login badge. The project launched 6 months later. It came in under budget, on time, and hit every metric. Stevenson used our tools to open 12 new locations by Q3. Clean execution. Zero drama. Bryce's LinkedIn went dark for a while. The last update I saw had him consulting independently out of Tampa. Word on the street was that he pitched himself to 3 major firms and got passed over for all of them. The industry is smaller than people think, and nobody wants a strategist who can't tell a swimsuit from a snowsuit. A month after we went live, I got an email from him. Subject line, coffee sometime. The body text was short, I think we should talk. I didn't reply, I didn't even open it. I just right-clicked, hit archive, and moved on. Some things don't deserve closure. My new office is on the 3rd floor. It has big windows that let in actual sunlight. There are no flickering bulbs. My name is on the door in the same font they use for the directors. I sign off on every strategy document that leaves this company. And every file I make still includes my initials, hidden in the metadata, where only the people who know what they're looking for can find them.